So here's the corporate fairy tale of early this year. We've heard the beautiful stories, the optimistic narratives, the soothing rhetoric, like AI is your partner and it's not replacing you, or it's augmenting you, or it's a multiplier, etc., etc. And look, AI can be all of those things, but the incentives tell a different story. Because in late February, Block, formerly known as Square, announced it was cutting over 4,000 jobs. It's not 40, not 400, but 4,000, which is nearly half its workforce. And Reuters' wording was basically like, this was part of an overhaul to embed artificial intelligence across its operations. Then the punchline, the stock jumped hard after hours on the order of more than 20%. That's not the market rewarding collaboration. Instead, that's the market rewarding a cost curve. And I don't even mean that as a moral judgment. It's just what the spreadsheet does. Wall Street isn't clapping for suffering. It's clapping for margins. And AI just makes the margin story easier to sell. So, when executives do the town hall meetings, hey, don't worry, it's human AI collaboration. And then the most visible real-world case study looks like AI plus fewer humans equals stock pop. People are not being dramatic or fragile. They're just noticing what actually gets rewarded, what the company really wants. When the market cheers AI plus fewer humans, employees take that as a signal. And the question becomes, okay, who's next? Now zoom out from one company. Goldman put a big number on the scale of exposure from generative artificial intelligence, hundreds of millions of job equivalents worth of tasks globally that could be touched by automation. And just so we're being precise, that's not hundreds of millions of people are unemployed tomorrow. It's more like a lot of jobs are about to get partially eaten, not the whole job, but chunks of it, the kind of chunks that used to justify hiring a junior person or keeping a whole team staffed the way it was. But here's the thing, numbers like that don't have to be perfect to change the vibe. They do what big numbers always do. They turn a vague fear into a specific figure you can't pretend you didn't see. And you can see the culture shift in real time if you scroll LinkedIn for 5 minutes, and you'll see people casually talking about AI employees or AI teammates like it's a normal line item, like we're all just supposed to nod and move on. That's not theory anymore. That's status anxiety, wearing business casual. Okay, so what's the gap here? The official story, the warm story is AI frees you from busy work. You move up the value chain and you reskill and you do more meaningful work. And plenty of management thinkers, reports, and conference panels, they're all building that narrative. But when you look at what companies say they expect to do with headcount, the warmth gets thinner. McKinsey's 2025 State of AI survey has this split. A meaningful chunk of respondents expected overall workforce reductions of 3% or more in the year ahead. A smaller chunk expected increases of that magnitude. And a bigger chunk expected no change. And the no change bucket is the part that shocked me, in a moment where everyone's talking like the ground is moving. But still a lot of people are basically saying, we'll be fine. Maybe that's the world changes, but not my job, and that's a very human bet. Anyway, surveys are messy, but directionally we can see the tilt. A lot of companies are not planning to grow through AI. They're planning to do more with less. So when people hear upskilling, they translate it as, oh cool, you're going to train me into something safer. But what a lot of firms are actually doing is, here's the tool, learn it, and also, we're not hiring more of you. And that's why white-collar fear in 2026 feels different from older automation waves. Robots, old school automation, those mostly went after work. That was obviously repetitive, assembly lines, data entry, stuff where everybody kind of knew the deal, like, yeah, eventually a machine is going to do this boring stuff. No one was emotionally attached to typing the same thing into a spreadsheet for 10 years or even more. This is different because generative AI is walking straight into the jobs where people build their identity around being a thinker. And maybe that sounds a bit dramatic, but you get what I mean. Think about the typical early career pipeline for a second. If you're a junior lawyer, a lot of your life is reading stuff that no one wants to read, summarizing it, drafting the first version. But that's literally how you develop judgment. And if you're a junior analyst, it's building models, putting decks together, doing the first pass so the senior people can come in and have insights. That's the apprenticeship. And if you're a junior programmer, it's writing code, breaking it, fixing it, learning the craft the hard way, because that's how you get better. And now the craft shifts. Not you're gone. More like you're the reviewer now. And on paper, that sounds fine. It really does. Like I can already hear the management line. You'll focus on higher value work. Cool. Great. Isn't it? But sit with it for 10 seconds because your internal story was, I'm valuable because I can think. And now the world is saying, you're valuable because you can supervise thinking. And yeah, maybe the paycheck stays the same. Maybe your title even stays the same. We're still in the same meetings, the same threads, the same Slack channels. But the part that starts to wobble is your sense of status and your sense of trajectory. Like, what am I becoming here? Where is this actually going? It's not just task displacement, it's status displacement. It's the weird feeling of being kept but being narrowed. And I'm not saying everyone feels this all the time. I'm saying once you notice it, it's hard to unnotice. And once you start seeing that kind of narrowing, you start spotting a quieter pattern, people in the system trying to slow the shift just enough to protect their corner. Financial Times had a story about this on the HR side. L'Oreal's recruiters started noticing something odd in video interviews. Candidates answering in this ultra-smooth, slightly uncanny way, like they were piping the questions into an AI tool off-screen and reading back the suggestions. Their response was to make the interview an AI-free zone. That's how it was described. They still use AI elsewhere in hiring, but they sanitize the live conversation. No heavy AI tools in the name of fairness and human connection. And on one level, that makes perfect sense. You do want to meet the actual person, not just their prompt window. On another level, it's also HR drawing a line around the one bit of the process that very clearly still requires human resources department. Slowing down the tech becomes a way of slowing down the automation of their own role, but they have to describe it and wrap in language about values and experience. If you're feeling spicy, you can call that hypocrisy. I read it as something slightly different, a reminder that the AI shift is not some smooth, neutral curve. Technology moves fast, but institutions don't, and the curve gets bent, delayed by whoever has enough power and vocabulary to argue for exceptions. And L'Oreal can plausibly sell that as brand and fairness. They're not a company whose whole value proposition is move fast and automate everything. But if you're in a company that markets itself as innovation, where efficiency is part of the identity, their HR probably does not draw that line for long. Now, here's where this stops being only a white collar identity crisis, because the bigger danger isn't just a job disappears, the bigger danger is the ladder disappears. Brookings, basically a US policy think tank, framed it in a way I actually like because it's simple. They basically say careers are pathways, and those pathways have rungs. They group jobs into three buckets: origin, gateway, and destination. Here's the plain English version. I would suppose nobody wants a taxonomy lecture, right? Origin jobs are the starting point, which means easier entry, usually lower wages. Destination jobs are where you're trying to end up, higher pay, more stability. And gateway jobs are the rungs or ladders in the middle, the roles that turn I have a job into I'm building a career. Now, if AI hits the gateway rungs hard, if it automates the apprenticeship work, if it compresses those stepping stone roles, you don't just get layoffs, you get stuck in your career, and you get a society where it's harder to climb even if you're working, even if you're doing everything right. And that is a different kind of instability. It's quieter, but it's nastier because it turns into resentment, and resentment always finds a home. So now you've got pressure from two directions at once: white collar identity stress at the top end of cognitive work, and ladder stress in the middle, where people used to climb into the middle class. And that matters. Now back to the corporate promise. Human AI collaboration can be real, but to make it real, companies would have to pay for the boring parts: a career transition map, real training investment, and some version of security. And most companies don't want to do that because it conflicts with the incentive they're being rewarded for. So what tends to happen in practice is subtler than mass layoffs. A lot of people might be able to keep their jobs, but their jobs change underneath them. You're still employed, but the job kind of morphs. The work gets sliced up differently. You spend less time building the thing and more time checking the thing, reviewing, approving, cleaning it up, making sure it doesn't embarrass anyone. And if that's the case, that shift can feel weirdly insulting, even if nobody's trying to do so. And psychologically, that can be worse because it's a slow erosion, death by 1,000 tiny rescopes. And we might start asking questions that we don't want to say out loud. Am I still necessary? Is this augmentation? Or is it training wheels before replacement? If AI is doing the first draft of my thinking, what exactly am I being paid for? And to be clear, I'm not trying to turn this into a therapy or shrink mode. I'm just saying chronic uncertainty is corrosive. It messes with our sleep, our planning, and our sense of self. Okay, zoom out a little. This is where it stops being just an economics of automation story and becomes a social structure story. For decades, a big chunk of middle-class stability came from a skills premium. If you get educated, if you become a professional, if you get onto the right ladder, your labor stays scarce. If AI compresses that, whether by shrinking white-collar apprenticeship paths or eroding gateway rungs, you don't just get job churn, instead you get status churn, and status churn doesn't stay in the workplace. It shows up as political anger, tribalism, and culture war energy. Not because AI causes politics, but because people experiencing perceived loss of status start to grab for explanations, and the loudest explanations tend to win. And here's where this becomes physical, not just digital. FT's Swamp Notes did one episode from Independence of Missouri, where locals pushed back against a proposed AI data center. The reporting was very simple, very human. People were worried about basics, like water use. That's the thing. AI isn't just software. It's infrastructure, land, power, water, tax, noise, heat, local politics, and polling. So the friction shows up not as I hate machine learning, but as why is my town paying the cost so a multi-billion-dollar industry can run GPU? That's a different kind of backlash than I'm worried about my job. It's I'm worried about my community. And once you see that, the corporate story gets even shakier because human AI collaboration is not just a workplace design question, it's a distribution question. Who captures the productivity gains? Who eats the risk? Who pays the infrastructure bill? And who loses the ladder rungs? And by the way, just so I don't pretend I'm above the things that I'm criticizing, yes, I picked vivid examples. Block is vivid. A data center revolt is vivid. L'Oreal is vivid. That's selection bias creeping in. But the pattern underneath the examples is real. The incentive gradient is shifting, and people feel it. And one last thing. This actually hit me while I was writing the episode. There's a new Fed paper by Crane and Soto looking specifically at coder employment. They say coder employment has decelerated sharply since the introduction of ChatGPT, and it has continued to grow, though much more slowly than it did pre-2022. And plain English version is they're not saying programmers disappeared, they're saying the growth curve bent downward. Like I said earlier, the job title survives, but the momentum does not. And then they do a back of the envelope that's kind of a gut punch. They write that roughly 500,000 additional coder jobs would have existed absent large-scale LLM. Translation again, it's not just layoffs. It's the jobs that never got created. It's the junior seats that didn't open, and the team that stayed at 6 people instead of becoming 8. Now, they're also careful here, very careful. They explicitly say, we caution against interpreting this as a simple causal effect, and they do not interpret the results as evidence that AI has eliminated 500,000 jobs, partly because many would have been absorbed into other occupations. Well, my guess is the mechanism is exactly what we've been talking about. Firms don't always fire everyone. Sometimes they just stop the ladder. The paper even floats that if firms anticipate AI substituting for labor, they may freeze hiring for a while. So this is the part that worries me. AI doesn't have to replace the whole job to destabilize a career. It just has to eat the apprenticeship layer, the gateway, and suddenly the whole career path gets harder to move through. And once that starts showing up in official data, even in one occupation, it's at least a signal. The incentives are shifting and the numbers are starting to rhyme with the vibe. So if you're hearing executives saying, don't worry, and you're also watching markets rewarding AI plus fewer humans, you're not crazy. You're just living in a system where the PowerPoint slides have different goals. And that's it for this episode. If you've got a personal example where AI genuinely improved your work or where it quietly changed your role, I want to hear it. What did your company say it was doing? And what did it actually reward? And last but not least, if you like this episode, please hit subscribe and like, and I'll see you next time.